Welcome to everyone watching on the live stream. Without further ado, I'm really pleased to welcome Rai Waddingham.
Hello, thank you, Akiko, and thanks everyone who's got out of bed and is here at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm really excited and daunted to be opening the NSUN Members Event. Last year I came and I was completely blown away by seeing and hearing from people that I'd not seen or heard before. It felt fresh, it felt challenging. And then here we are 1 year later, starting with me. And I feel in some ways like a very tired old voice, more so since my birthday last week. But I guess what I felt was missing maybe from last year was a centering of mad voices. We heard from lots of different people, but I didn't see much around psychosis or what gets called psychosis and kind of some of these really marginalized experiences that are difficult to talk about, even in spaces like NSUN. And so I guess one of the reasons I was invited this year is to try to maybe center some of this madness without eclipsing and decentering all of the other intersectional identities and inequalities that influence whether people get invited to these kind of tables. It's a bit of a big job, but I'll see what I can do. I was going to give a wider talk. Actually, what I'm going to do is strip it back down to the personal. I changed it at the last minute, and I hope you'll indulge me with this, and that maybe some of what I speak about will be relatable or provoke some thought or be useful in some way. But before I start, I feel I need to put a few things on the table first. I'm white. That bit is obvious. I move through the world as a white woman. I'm bi. That bit is not so obvious. Most people see me as straight because I'm married to a guy. So that's something that I think most people in this room don't know about me. My gender is complex. I identify mostly as a woman, and you'll see she, her pronouns in my name, but I'm multiple. I have a constellation of parts and people within me, some of whom are male, female, or genderless. And so every time I use the she, her, I'm kind of eclipsing part of my truths, which is painful sometimes. But it's tricky. How open do I be? How much do I show of this messy complexity that I don't yet have words for? I have a schizophrenia diagnosis, but the people on the bus next to me don't know this. It's not visible unless I talk about it. And what I talk about is quite carefully curated. I'm careful not to be too raw, too much. You wouldn't know these things just from sitting down next to me. And I have a soft voice. So even when I talk about voices and visions, I smile, I'm gentle, I'm polite. I'm really aware of not wanting to push people too far. So I hold back. I want to be heard. And I guess I justify this to myself with this noble idea of making change, you know, of sacrificing aspects of myself for the bigger picture. But am I heard? Are we heard? And I can't really speak for the we in this, but am I heard? And I think, yes, in some ways, but no, in lots of ways. I think when I speak in any space, what people take from it is filtered through the lens of the listener. You know, I tend to be brought in, I guess, as an exemplar or a case study or as someone that's making the point that the people who are creating the conference or the meeting want to hear. So the psychoanalysts will go, that's a really interesting psychic structure. The people who prescribe might be, this is great. Ray talks about how meds have really helped her in times of crises. But the deep prescribers will listen to the same thing and go, yes, listen to the side effects, the journey of withdrawal. I think I was really interested by Akiko's article in the last week. I guess I'm positioned as a critical friend a lot of the time. I promote a little bit of unsettledness around the edges in meetings. I challenge a little bit, but it's enough to leave people feeling uncomfortable, but glad that they're uncomfortable. And yet the core stays the same. I'm tinkering around the edges of these big beliefs. So I know I can make an impact, and what I say and do isn't without merit. It kind of has some value, I hope. Otherwise, I'd have just become a plumber, because that's tempting some days. And I know that there's people in this very room, just looking at the names of people that have made huge changes and who the world feels the impact. So it's not that there's nothing to be gained through talking out. But for me, some days it feels like these beliefs are heavy. The things that I'm trying to challenge are tethered to a set of really strong beliefs in hundreds of thousands of people that hold each other up. And this systematic change that I really want just feels really far away from what is possible. And I could stop. I feel sometimes angry, and I could go, why aren't you listening to me? I feel furious sometimes. I'm good at ranting. I can rant a really good rant. But even saying that, you'll notice that my voice is still soft. I still smile. I'm still a little bit self-depreciating. I can't escape this. And I guess what I've been doing in the last sort of year or so is starting to think about, well, what is it that I can unsettle or disrupt in myself? Why is it that I get pulled into certain ways of presenting myself? Why do I choose certain things to say and hide other things? What can I disrupt in the opportunities that I'm given? And these are just a few of my thoughts. I'm hoping that some of you guys have been thinking about this too, and maybe have some thoughts of your own. The first thing that I'm trying to disrupt is this avoidance of taboos. I speak a lot about experiences that are already marginalised. So hearing voices is not your dinner table conversation, really. It is in my dinner table, but around the world, well, around this country, I won't say the world, it's not an everyday conversation for most people. So I'm aware that I'm talking about voices and visions and overwhelming beliefs and things that get called paranoia. And that feels like a big risk a lot of the time in the public. But I stop short, and I know that I stop short. I get close to the edge, saying things that I think might be really challenging, but I rarely go over. Because if I did go over, I'd start to feel like people are questioning my credibility, my sanity. And to be honest, if I was to talk openly about some of these things that I go through, my messy realities, I might risk some very tangible and scary consequences as a mum who is trying really hard to be seen as a good mum and a safe mum, and is trying hard to be a good mum and a safe mum. And for someone who's has had the Mental Health Act been used against them, has been held down and restrained, I know that all these things are possible if I go too far, if people start to raise questions about what is going on inside me. I can go further than many people because of my soft voice and my quiet, female, non-threatening demeanour, but it's still there. So I talk about the three voices that I hear, the ones that are saying that people might hurt me, I talk about Blue, the cute little voice. What I don't talk about is the not yets, the voices I hear that tell me to kill people or harm people. The voices, a bit hard to say this stuff sometimes, even in an NSUN space. The voices that talk about violence in really explicit ways, the ones that still get under my skin, and that if my psychiatrist, who I'm actually speaking to this afternoon, was to Google this talk, I'm kind of worried about what the conversation might look like this afternoon. So it's a risk saying it even here. Whew. But to disrupt things, I kind of need, because I'm in a very powerful position in a world in which I'm probably not that powerful, but relatively I've got power. And I want to use that power to talk about the things that are maybe less okay to talk about. Because if I can't talk about them, well, how do we create a stage and a space and groups where people can come in and talk about these really challenging things and expect to be heard? So it's tricky. And even I feel nervous about saying these things. It's a worrying sign about our society and how people take this kind of information and what happens to it. I'm trying to challenge not being too much. And this, I think, is very gendered. As a woman, I've kind of noticed a while ago, I was doing a fundraising walk and I was holding my body in, trying to be small on the road so that that I didn't inconvenience anybody. And I do that when I walk around town, try and make myself as small as possible, hunch a little bit. I don't walk proud very often, at least. And I do that with my experiences. I have this sense of try not to be too much, don't be too raw. Be authentic, but not overshare, because if we overshare, people will become uncomfortable, as some people might be now. Some apologies there, but only a few apologies. Be vulnerable, but appropriately vulnerable. Don't show these big emotions. Those big emotions got me labelled with borderline personality disorder. So I've learned very much not to show those, because weirdly in the mental health world, that diagnosis is way more damaging to me than the schizophrenia diagnosis I've had for decades now. So to disrupt things, I'm trying really hard to not hold myself in so much, not be quite so careful of other people's feelings. Like, people still exist, and I'm talking to you guys, and you're going to have feelings in relation to what I've said. It might touch some raw nerves, or you might feel angry, or you might feel heard. I don't know. I don't want to forget the audience and the people that I'm trying to connect with. But to do justice to myself and my lived experience, I want to show a bit of my rawness, a bit more of my vulnerability, my pain, and sometimes my anger. I struggle with showing the anger, but it's there, and people who know me well maybe hear it more. And I'm trying to talk about things that are maybe a little less processed. It's so much easier to talk about things in the past that you've got distance from, but I'm living this stuff every day, and I'm trying to find space for the now and what isn't yet storied. The final thing I've been thinking about is this idea of stories. And just to say, I'm not the first person to say these things or write these things or think these things. I'm influenced by this whole network of survivor knowledge that's out there, articles and ideas and conversations. So this isn't some big revelation to you, I'm guessing. But I've realized that when I tell my life experiences, I often fall into this pull of a narrative of a beginning, middle, and end. It's a little bit messier than that. I've always resisted the turning point stuff because I didn't have a turning point. But it still always ends on this nice positive note. It's like I tie my narrative up, my story up in a bow, and give it to you and go, this is what I hope you get from it. This is the learning points. This is the thing. And doing that or not doing that is probably really hard for me. And I'm going to keep trying to resist it, because every time I do that, I think I do an injustice to the people listening. You know, I stop people just taking, life is raw and life is messy and it's still confusing. And I don't have this brilliant savior narrative. I'm not a hero. I'm not a victim. I'm this messy, awesome, weird collection of stuff that I'm trying to thread together in some kind of story for myself, but I'm still threading it. And then when I say it to other people as if it's fixed, what I'm doing is just really confusing. And yet, when I have stepped away from this narrative structure in the last year, in safer spaces, in my own trainings and things, I've had really interesting responses. I've had people sort of say, so what do you want from me? Why? What do you need? It's as if I'm making a demand by stepping out of this neater structure that is really uncomfortable to sit with and be with. It's like I've broken this kind of contract, and that maybe as a society, maybe we're struggling just to listen and be with our messy narratives. And I'm asking people more and more to try and do this, which brings me to the role of allies. Many of the people who have said, whoa, are you okay, Ray? Or not invited me back when I've been more vulnerable, or have explicitly said, what do you need from me? Why are you telling me this? Why are you putting me through this? They've been allies. They've been people that I think are trying to make changes similar to how I'm trying to make changes. And I've been part of conference organising groups with allies who are thinking about the lived experience voice to bring in, and are kind of going, we need someone who's safe. We don't want someone who's going to anger or upset this group or that group. We want someone who will stick to the message. Whose message? Why do we have a message? I don't know. I guess what I'm saying to any allies listening is really do some work on yourself, as I'm trying to do work on myself, because I'm not free of this. I'm part of our society. But when we're inviting people, what are we inviting them into? How can we create more spaces so that we're not fighting for space, that there's not this sense that only one kind of voice gets heard? Because my voice is one of those, I know that. And part of the answer is for me to step off the stage, which is getting really meta, because I'm so tempted to step off in some big gesture of solidarity, but I don't think that's the answer. I need to make space for other voices. But the allies and all these spaces that we go into need to have more people. They need to make this possible to hear from those that are still self-harming, those that are still living this, those that are in long-term residential care, all of these different voices that we don't hear so much of. Final point, and then I'm going to open to any questions or thoughts or comments that you guys want to make. It's how are we with each other? And this is the tricky bit. In the recent lived experience leadership report, I heard so many stories of people whose knowledge, and I think this living experience is knowledge, that we all have knowledge, but that their knowledge and experiences have been silenced or siloed and put in the corner and not listened to by others. And that was incredibly painful to hear. But the bit that got me most was those of us who feel that they've put their head above the parapet and spoken out, often at cost, but have felt shot at by people from within our own movements from within the survivor movements. And that's hard. And that seems to hurt even more. And one response, I was like, what do I say to this if I'm going to name it? And I'm not the first person to name it, I know. I guess I could say, be kind, guys, hashtag. No, that's not what I want to say. Be kind is a way of smoothing over these very painful and huge ideological, experiential reality differences. We're not all saying the same thing, and that's okay. We might have really strong debates about what it is that we feel needs to happen, and that's okay. I guess what I'm asking for and hoping for within myself is that I can recognize the humanity and the courage and the wisdom of someone who has a very different experience and a different point to make than myself, that I never lose that, because it's easy to lose when feelings are high. I guess I'm looking at protecting and promoting the right of as many people to speak as possible and using my position to do that as much as I can. I kind of want there to be a both and, to really lift up the right of people to speak their truths, whilst also believing in my right to speak my truths, looking for polyphony, looking for plurality even. You can tell I'm a multiple here. Against a backdrop of crafting spaces where we could have a fundamental grounding of solidarity that we can hold on to even when we disagree. I feel like I should wrap this up in a neat bow, but I guess that's the end of what I've been thinking of saying and thinking of feeling and all of that stuff. But I'm going to resist the narrative arc with the inspiration and see whether there's any questions or comments that are coming up. Yeah. If I read them, I've got a lot of people saying that they kind of get what I'm saying. And that assumption that I'm not going to read names because I don't know if people have consented to names, but the idea that people assume if you talk about self-harm, that it means you've stopped. Well, who said I've stopped? Said the contributor. Yeah, powerful. Anything, Amy, that I've missed, that a question that's come up or anything?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of people saying thank you for this because it's really resonating, and it is with me as well. So thank you very much.
That's right.
Oh, there is a question that has just come through. It's a bit of a tricky one, but if you want to answer that is in the chat.
Yeah. So, to what extent should this be cast as a political problem? I'm scared of answering it because I don't understand what politics means in a way, which I probably shouldn't say publicly because there's different kinds of political problems. But I think I'd cast it very much as a wider problem than just like on different levels, the way in which we might have a toxic environment sometimes within the survivor movement, I think isn't about the survivor movement. I think it's about the landscape that we're in and how those in power tightly curate what we're allowed to do and what we're not. And that can set us up against each other. And so I think that is inherently political. Around what I say and what I feel able to say, yeah, I guess that's political too. It's gendered, it's about class, it's about acceptability, what is heard, it's about normativity, and that serves some very powerful functions. So I worry about talking about politics because I feel like I know so little compared to many in this room. But I think it's important to go beyond the individual. So I started very much with my story, but I don't want it to end there. It feels like my story is playing out all of these stuff in our socio-political, God, that's a big word, landscape. And I'm feeling those effects even though I can't see them. And I've been reenacting those for years, and trying to break out of it is just so bloody tough. Okay, I think that's probably the end of my presentation, which means we're 2 minutes over, but I'm resisting the shiny bow thing. And if I keep talking, I will do it, because it's a nudge. Hi, Kiko, and thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you so much to those that have listened, and also those that have shared something of themselves. I'm going to hang around a bit and read some of those chats.
Thank you so much, Ray. That resonated with so many people, as you'll be able to see in the chat, resonated with me. And thank you for resisting the bow. I'm not sure I would have been able to resist the bow. So I hope you're able to stay a little bit longer and connect with people. Just to let everyone know, we've got our AGM business meeting starting in a couple of minutes. So we're going to stop live streaming.